Jeffrey, 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 Jeffrey. What's up, Jeff? How's it going?
Wow,
Welcome.
that's a new one. Usually I get like, my name is Jeff or Jeffafa or
I just got
any version of that.
3 episodes ago. I said I'll try to bring you in a different way. So do a Liberty jingle. I don't think we're big enough to get a lawsuit from them. So free advertisement, you know.
Only my mom calls me Jeffrey, but I guess that's fine. Jeff or J Cone. Some people call me J Cone in the zone back in
Yeah,
college.
Jeff wouldn't work with the Liberty, the syllable thing, so I just had to audible. But we have a good episode for you guys today, talking about saving, budgeting, credit cards. I have some interesting, more hotter takes, so it's not just standard run of the mill basic stuff. I think there'll be something in here for everyone. I think Dave Ramsey's a pretty popular podcast, and in my opinion, Dave Ramsey is always like, if you can live off of ramen every day, you should do that. I don't think that's really realistic. So I think we're going to add a new element of it, but still from a financial perspective, which will be great. We'll always start with the icebreaker. Football season's right around the road. I know I usually ask for your predictions and you always say Chiefs, which is so boring. So we're going to switch it up. Are you playing fantasy football this year, Jeff?
Yeah, I'm in 2 leagues this year.
Okay. Any notable punishments? My league needs to pick a punishment for the last place in fantasy, or anything you've heard in the past and fun or interesting.
Yeah, no, so we don't do a punishment, and one of these leagues is a new league, but I actually did hear a funny punishment story the other day of this 40, maybe he's like in his mid 40s man, had to go give a legitimate competitive effort at a horse riding competition, but it was like a stick horse. And so he had to go out and like do like the run or like the barrel run, and he had to like show his horse and go out there. And like at some point there's like a picture of like him and all the other contestants, and he's like this large 40-year-old man with like a bunch of 10-year-old girls. And so he had to do that. I think that's great. Yeah.
I like that. Kind of on the same token, I know like a semi-common one is you have to take the SAT and get a certain score. And my thing with fantasy punishments is like the best thing is like going to watch the embarrassment. I feel like no one's gonna go. I've seen people like go and tailgate in the high school parking lot while they take it, but I want to see them be embarrassed if we're doing something like that. And I feel like they're behind closed doors for
maybe
a
like
5 hour.
like a costume night at a karaoke bar where they have to like dress in drag or something like that, and like really, I saw something of somebody like playing this karaoke song, and it's like a really popular song that everybody knows, but he sang the first line over and over to the rhythm of the song. Just the first line of the song.
I'm sure you got booed out today.
You were working as a waitress at a cocktail bar.
Oh, that just kept
going. And that's what he said over and over and over and over and over.
That's pretty good. Yeah, I know you can get pretty creative with those punishments, and there's quite a few good ones. So we'll definitely have to come up with something. I like that karaoke. I love the horse.
Oh man, that's brutal, man. Like some parents were like concerned, like what's going on with this guy? They probably had to like warn some people in the audience, like this guy's not a creep. We're just punishing him for being bad at fantasy football.
For sure. All right. Well, let's get into it. We have an awesome episode. Let's get into it.
Hello, and welcome to Map Your Money, a finance-focused podcast. We exist to simplify the lives of our clients and listeners and to help individuals create the roadmap for their financial future. Calls are pre-screened and the content was pre-recorded. Please note that the content presented is for educational purposes only. We encourage you to consult a financial advisor or conduct your own due diligence before making any investment decisions. All information provided is believed to be reliable but is not guaranteed for accuracy or completeness. This presentation does not constitute investment, legal, or tax advice, nor an offer to buy or sell any security or insurance product. It also does not endorse any third party or their views. All examples are hypothetical and for illustrative purposes only.
Credit card arbitrage involves borrowing funds at a low interest rate, typically through promotional credit card offers, and investing those funds in higher yielding assets. This strategy carries significant risks, including the potential for interest rate increases, loss of promotional terms, investment losses, and damage to credit scores. Investors should carefully consider their financial situation, risk tolerance, and ability to repay borrowed funds before engaging in credit card arbitrage. This strategy may not be suitable for all investors, and past performance is not indicative of future results. The use of credit cards as a part of an investment or financial strategy may introduce significant risks. These include high interest rates, potential damage to credit scores, loss of promotional terms, and the possibility of accumulating debt that exceeds repayment capacity. Credit card financing is not suitable for all investors and should be approached with caution. Investors should carefully evaluate their financial situation, risk tolerance, and ability to repay before using credit cards for investment purposes. This communication is intended for informational purposes only and does not constitute a recommendation or guarantee of future performance.
So I did mention that I have some hotter takes and kind of want to go against the grain a little bit, but I do want to start with the basics. I think as a financial planner, it's really important to understand the basics of saving, budgeting, and kind of go from there. So I'd say the most important thing when you're kind of starting your saving journey or trying to improve your finances, I'd say one of the most important things is an emergency fund. This in the CFP world, we're taught to say between 3 to 6 months of living expenses. I think somewhere in that range is really, really important. So if your living expenses you realize are around $5,000 per month, you want anywhere between 15 to 30,000 of liquid savings available. How you have that kind of depends on what you're available or able to find. High yield savings accounts are great. A money market, if you're able to use that, is really good as well. But you want it to be liquid. And the main reason is life happens. Things are going to happen. If you own a home, something's going to break. If you own a car, more likely than not, something's going to happen and there's going to be an unexpected expense. You don't want to have to take out credit card debt. You don't want to have to withdraw from your 401k or any other account that's invested, even if it's a brokerage account. You don't want to have to sell those investments at a gain or whatever it might be. So having some amount of liquid funds is always really, really important.
Definitely agree with that. Definitely agree. I think what's important about that is liquid, right? I think when you have an emergency fund, you want to make sure it's available in there when you need it. And that's one of the things that's really important thing about budgeting and saving and expanding that out is matching the investment asset with the time period for the goal of that savings, right? So if it's something that you know you might need at a moment's notice, you want to make sure it's something that, one, is accessible and you can convert it to cash, but also, two, the value does not fluctuate very much. So, emergency funds, sometimes you hear people talking about, well, I got money in stocks or I got money in this and that. Well, that's not an emergency fund, because a stock, we can see how, you're in April and all of a sudden you need cash, but your stock portfolio is down 20%. So I think that's a really important thing from the investment side of the emergency fund bucket.
For sure. Sticking with the basics, I think after you kind of have that solidified or in token and lockstep with that, is making sure saving wise you're maxing out the match from your 401k. So if your company offers a 4% match, you're contributing whatever you need to be to get that 4% match. Sometimes it's contributing 4% to get a 4% match. Sometimes it's 100% for the first 3%, 50% for the next 2%. So you have to contribute 5% to get the 4% match. Whatever you need to do to get that match, I think, is really, really important. Even if you're saying, hey, the biggest goal of my life right now is to buy a house or to do something else with this money. I'll kind of talk about this bucketing strategy here, but the 401k match is free money. It's an auto 100% return that you can get. And as long as you're able to meet your expenses, I think if you're able to max out that match from your 401k, I'd say it's kind of bare minimum when you're looking at saving goals and first money that should be allocated.
Yeah, and I think something that maybe some people don't realize about that match, especially if it's a safe harbor match, is this is required by legislation and it's automatically vested. And that's different than if your employer puts in, what they call like a discretionary contribution. That may take you 2-3 years to vest, to where if you leave the company, leave the service, you still get to keep that contribution. The matches are automatically vested, just like your own contribution. So it really is that upfront 100% return, plus a jump starter to all those extra shares that are going to keep growing. So I think honestly, that's a no-brainer. I mean, you got to get your match. And I think for me personally, I've always bogeyed 10% of my income into the 401k at least. And so that's 10% is going to get you your match. And again, it's not dollar for dollar because you're deducting that from your taxable income. And so it's really every dollar you put in, you're really only seeing a 75-cent, 80-cent difference in your ultimate after-tax compensation.
For sure. And then kind of beyond that 401k, here's where it becomes a little bit more of a gray area and just very dependent on your goals. So if you're trying to buy a house or have a big purchase coming up, whether it's a wedding or a kid's wedding or whatever it might be, then you want to maybe save a little bit more of that excess income into a brokerage account or a savings account. If you're trying to get your kids through college or your kids are young and saving a pool of money for them, maybe it's more money to a 529. If retirement is the next big saving thing for you, then it's how do we maximize the most money into these retirement accounts? But the point I wanted to make here is that a lot of people say, hey, my next goal is buying a house or my next goal is getting the kids through college. And I think a common fallacy is saying, hey, this is the next biggest goal I need to save for, so I'm going to put every dollar towards that. But then you really miss out on this effective compound interest. And you want to do what's called a bucketing strategy in terms of, hey, I want to maybe buy a house or I want to get the kids through college, but I also want to retire at some point. So I'm not going to neglect this bucket completely. I'm going to max out my 401k match and maybe I'll do some Roth contributions or something else for this. But the majority of your money can go to one of these other buckets, but at least putting something into one of each of the buckets throughout time will really, really make a difference with that compound interest. And I think goes a long way rather than saying, hey, for the next 10 years, I'm saving all my income towards buying this house. And then after that, I'll worry about retirement. You're really missing out of the big benefit, that eighth wonder of the world, as it's called, of compound interest.
Yeah, there's a really cool chart on JP Morgan. I don't have it pulled up. So I can't give you the exact numbers, but it's basically showing like the effect of compound interest and the growth of an account if you invest at 20 and hold it to 65, if you wait 10 years and do it to 65, and actually that 10-year difference, it almost makes, I think it was like double the account balance if you just started 10 years early, because compounding is, it's like rolling a snowball down a hill in those old cartoons. The bigger it gets, the bigger the effect, and it's always that subsequent effect that's even larger and larger. And when you really start to hit that big increase in the slope in years 20, 25, 30, but then every year thereafter you're hitting these huge returns. So I think buying a house is great, but it's not the only avenue for shelter. And getting your 401k started, getting your Roth started early, and getting that compound interest started early, that's really, you cannot get that time back. And it's a crucial component of building a portfolio.
For sure. Chris and I do these 401k presentations at different companies that we help with the 401k at. And there's one slide in there that shows if you save from 25 to 35 into your 401k and then stop saving from there till 60, versus someone who just waits till 35 and then saves from 35 to 65, which is a much longer time period, obviously. Person who just saved for 10 years is actually has more money because they were in the market longer, even though they contributed significantly less over their career.
Right. And that money keeps growing, and yeah, I think that's the exact chart that I'm thinking of. Yeah. And it really just shows how big of an impact, even when you compare different like absolute levels of return, starting early is just always better, because it's at some point your ending bucket is like 80% gains, 80% interest, and like your original principal balance is such a small part of it. So the really only way to achieve that is to start early.
Yeah. And then the last point I'd make while we're still on the basics would be just automate as much as you're able to. I think people get money, but one of the best perks of a 401k is it's so automated that people don't even realize that they're saving it. But one thing that we're able to do with clients, or however you're saving, if you're able to say, hey, okay, X amount of money is going to come out of my paycheck, or X amount of money is going to come out of my bank account and go to this account every month, and you don't even think of that as money that's, I guess, yours to spend, it's kind of the best way to do it. Because if that money's just sitting in your account, and it's on you to say every 3 months or 6 months, I'll then invest it or do something with it. It's very easy to lose track of that and be like, oh, okay, I have all this money. I'm going to buy XYZ. Really automating as much of the savings and investing that you're able to will really, really go a long way.
Yeah, I think I do that personally, where
Yeah.
I actually do it in like two different ways. Where I have obviously your 401k and your investments come out, but then also I have some of my check allocated directly to my high yield savings, and to me that's like filling up those buckets, right? And so I've tricked my mind into thinking that what goes into my checking account is my real paycheck, right? And that's what I'm allowed to spend in my mind. Now, it doesn't mean I don't go over sometimes, but I now have a buffer, right? Because I've already allocated some of that to my savings. And by the way, that's after I've contributed to 401k and investment. So I think that's like one way, an easy way to trick yourself. Another way I do this, I recommend this to every single young person that I talk to coming out of college. And so if you're young and saving, listen up, trick yourself into saving your raise. So like every single raise that I've received in my career, every raise feels like a raise. If you get a 10% raise or a 20% raise, it all feels like a raise because you're getting more money. Take half of it and allocate it to savings. So that way you still got a raise. It still feels like a raise, but really part of that you're using to juice up the amount that you're contributing to your 401k. So, you get a 10% raise, well, increase your 401k by 5 percentage points. Or maybe you want to increase it by 2.5 percentage points and then start a Roth or a different investment account on the side. Or maybe you want to increase the amount that automatically goes to your savings. So yeah, your checking account number went up, not as much as you thought, but it still feels like a raise to you. And now in the background, you're saving more on the side without even realizing it. You do that over time and you have a good career and get a lot of raises, you can start to really save a lot of money and not even realize that, you're kind of living below your means. And I think that ultimately is a great way to kind of trick your mind into building savings and also kind of living within a lower means, which, once you adjust to living at a higher means, there's no going back, right? It's just like, so you almost like trick yourself to wait.
Hmm.
So you're not used to it.
Yeah, I've seen the advice that like every time you get a raise, you should allocate all of that percentage into saving. I also don't think that's realistic. It's because you are growing in your career, you're earning more money, it's deserved. Um, your lifestyle is going to increase as your income increases, kind of whether you like it or not, I guess. Like it's for the most people, it's going to increase. It's going to change that psychological thing in you. Is like you're making more money, you feel like you can spend more money. But I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there in terms of can you trick yourself to saying, okay, I'm going to save some of this as well. One thing that I like to do is say, okay, I'm going to be saving between 15 to 20% always. If my income goes up by 20%, my savings are going up too, because I need to be in
Amen.
that 15 to 20% range. And just kind of always stay in there. And that's like a good rule of thumb as well. Um,
Yeah, I think it's important for people to reward themselves for getting a raise. And sometimes you get a raise because it's a cost of living adjustment, and so your expenses are going up anyway. And those I wouldn't say like, okay, you got a 3% raise, make sure half of that goes to your 401k. Like if it's a cost of living adjustment, maybe that's not, but like a big like step up or a different pay scale, something like that equivalent. But I'm with you. People should feel that benefit. I think the big thing about not giving yourself all of it is that I've learned you just spend whatever you raise it. Like you see the money go into account, you just find a way to spend it. It's like having cash. Right? Like I never like having cash on me because I never know where it goes. I'm always losing it. Right. So um yeah, I feel like that's kind of the better way to go about it.
That's a great transition into budgeting. So, we had a quick little chat right before. You mentioned that you don't use a lot of budgeting apps or softwares. I personally don't either. I think that budgeting is really important. I think a lot of people who are I have a certain amount of clients who budget to a T. They'll come into a meeting, they have an Excel spreadsheet, they're extremely analytical. They're like, this is exactly how much money that goes to each of these bills. And I think that's amazing. Personally, I kind of envy it. Like I wish I was able to kind of do that as well and or had that good of a grip on it as well. But I think there's other ways you can be smart about your money without having to be that delineated or use an app for every single purchase that you make. So kind of wanted to talk about that a little bit more. I think that's something that is kind of overlooked or people don't talk about. Every finance pod or Dave Ramsey is like, you need to budget to a T. Every single dollar needs to be accounted for. But I guess where have you kind of seen success, Jeff, in kind of managing your budget or looking at that?
Yeah, I certainly don't like go down the list and be like, all right, like today or this month I'm spending $500 on groceries and like $60 on gas and whatever. But I think what I like to segment my expenses in kind of your discretionary versus required, right? Or mandatory. So like my mortgage, I have to pay that. My car insurance, I have to pay that. My utility bills, I know what those are. My internet bill, I know what that is, right? I also know of kind of other expenses that are recurring, my HBO, my Apple subscription, all that BS. And so with that in mind, I can kind of have like a number where I know like, here's my kind of mandatory spending level. Here's my checking account number, right? That I use for my purposes of how much am I allowed to spend. And I can kind of know like what my quote unquote discretionary spending budget is. So to me, it's not really as much classifying each individual type of item versus like what is it a mandatory or discretionary purchase for you? Add up all your mandatory purchases and then you know kind of your monthly wiggle room of how much can you blow in a certain month, how much can you just go spend and that's for you to spend. And I think for some people they get a boat or they get an expensive house or they get a new car and so their mandatory budget goes up and they don't have as much discretionary income here. I drive an old car. I bought a small house. I don't have student loan debt, right? So I like to leave myself a lot of discretionary spending power. And I think because of that, I don't really have to budget as much. But it's still like I kind of know within my head like a bogey of like, okay, took Sam out to a really nice dinner, bought myself maybe like a new shirt or, went to LL Bean and spent a couple $100 or something. It's like I know I can't go just spend now more money. I've kind of eaten into that. So that's kind of the way I view it. And again, if you can bogey that number and then keep it under what I'm automatically putting into my savings account, then I'm already intuitively growing on, beyond that. And that works for me great.
And I think that automation piece is really, really important there is if you know, okay, I'm automatically saving into my 401k, I'm automatically saving into that high yield savings, maybe automatically into a brokerage account, into other things for my future goals. It's okay, this extra discretionary income I can spend and know, okay, I think other people do it backwards. They're like, okay, I'm going to spend all I have for this month. Oh, this is how much I have left over. I'll save that. I think doing it on the front end actually saves you a ton of stress and worry and allows you to actually potentially spend more or be more free with your finances because you're not worried about, oh, I still need to save at the end of the month or you already did that. This money's now for you to enjoy.
That's a Warren Buffett quote. Did you know that?
I did not.
That's like literally a Warren Buffett quote that says, spend what is left after saving. Don't save what's left after spending. Because you will always spend what you give yourself, always, which is why it's important to trick yourself that you don't have that money. It's somewhere else.
There you go. A young Warren Buffett? I don't know. You said it, not me.
Yeah, you said it. You brought it. It sounds like it was an organic thought.
It was. I haven't heard
any stock tips?
I don't.
Are you buying United Healthcare like he did?
But then the other thing I was going to say there is I actually use like my credit card as a form of budgeting. So I've come across a lot of people who obviously you want to pay off. You never want to have credit card debt. You want to pay this off each month. One thing I've started to run into more and more is that a lot of people, they just like hate to see a balance number in there and they'll pay it off every time they open their credit card app. And I guess if you're budgeting in a different way or whatever it might be, maybe it's worth it there. But my advice is always choose a day of the month, like your credit card bill is due at the end of the month. Pay it on the same day every month. And then you have an idea of how much you've been spending each month. Oh, okay, July was more expensive or June was cheaper or this month was more expensive. So I need to cut back next month. And then I think it also helps with your credit because you're paying this bill off on the exact same date every month repetitively. Which might be true or not. I'm not gonna.
I don't know. I don't know if that factors into the credit score, but definitely just making the on-time payments does. Which,
for sure,
I'm with you. There's no reason to pay off a credit card early because these are banks that are issuing this money, and when they receive your money, they're just going to go invest it and earn interest. And I always tell people, somebody's earning interest on your cash. It might as well be you. So if you have money just sitting in your checking account that you decide, well, I'm going to send it to JP Morgan Chase to pay off my Chase Freedom. Well, now JP Morgan has your cash and they're going to earn interest when you could have been earning that cash for the 15 days in between the due date. So I think to your point, you want to wait for the statement balance date to pay off the due date to pay off the full statement balance. Then you will not be charged interest, and it's really easy to avoid interest on these credit cards. And if you use them that way, then you can use them effectively to give yourself a 2 to 5% discount on everything.
Yeah.
And like you, I often look at my balances on my credit cards and think, okay, where am I at within that discretionary level, right? And that's usually I have like one credit card I use, Citi Double Cash Card, because it's 2% cash back effectively if you pay off the statement balance.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that's kind of like what I use to spend on random stuff throughout the month. And so I can kind of watch that balance and be like, okay, it better be below that level. And then I pay it off whenever the due date is. So I think Dave Ramsey will tell you, never use any debt, never use any credit cards. I think that doesn't give people enough credit for being able to successfully manage their finances, but I do understand how it's a slippery slope for some people that can't manage their finances, right? But I think that detail and that context should be added.
For sure. And I think there's a grain of salt to add with kind of all of these points is you want to have a good handle on your finances. I think Dave Ramsey makes really good points for people who it's very easy to lose the grip on your finances. And if you're having this debt, there's a chance that you default and feel like that's not money you owe. And then you get into credit card debt and it gets scary. But more into if you have like a really good handle on your finances, Jeff, I know this is something that you've taken advantage of. I know a couple other clients and other people have as well, is when there's promotional credit cards, if you're able to put money on that and they have 0% interest rate on that for a year or 18 months, and you're able to earn 4% on a money market or in a high yield savings account, that's what we called arbitrage. You can make that extra money.
Credit card arbitrage.
There you go.
I think I coined that. I think it's risky, right? Because think about what the credit card company's trying to do. They're offering you that promo rate to get you to put a balance on there and then essentially forget about it or not be able to pay it off. And then you're being upcharged to that 18 or 28%. So it's crucial that anybody that uses that strategy knows when that due date, when that promo rate period ends, and then to pay off that full statement balance at that time so that they are not charged interest. But if you can do this and manage that well, to your point, Arish, you have times when, hey, me and 10 buddies are going to go on a ski trip to Park City, and no worries, guys, I'll buy the Airbnb, just pay me back. And the Airbnb is $8,000, so you just put it on a credit card, all your buddies pay you minus your portion, and so now you have that just sitting in an account ready for the due date. And that's how I've used it a lot in the past. It's for those big purchases that you don't want to have to take money out of your savings, that you can just do it for interest free and still pay it off anyway, and maybe even get a little extra interest on top of that. So I think it's a little more sophisticated. I think you have to have the discipline for that, but that has worked for me. And of course, there's other types of backstops that you can have to be able to refinance if for some reason you don't have the cash. But I think if you know for certain you can't, if you don't know for certain that you can't pay that off, then you should not be playing with that fire.
Yeah, no, you definitely need to be very on top of it. If you are questioning if you could or aren't able to, it's probably not a strategy for you by any means, but I still think it's worth kind of talking about. And I know we kind of mentioned credit cards there. You mentioned the card that you use. What are kind of your thoughts on different types of credit cards? And I guess how did you come to the conclusion that was the card that you wanted to use?
You just compare, I think, benefits costs, right? So basically the cost of the credit card mostly for people is interest, unless you're the merchant that's accepting it as payment. And so for me, I know that's a moot point. So to me, I don't care about the interest rate. I'm always paying my balance off at the due date for the statement balance. So then the benefit goes to, well, what are the cash back rewards? And what are the benefits assigned to a card? So I have rules. I don't buy cards that have an annual fee unless I know I can explicitly make back the annual fee. So I have one credit card that has an annual fee. It's $95 and I get $10 of statement credit back every month for my Disney Plus subscription that I was already using before I got the card. So that's a no-brainer. And it includes other things like 6% cash back on groceries up to a certain level. And I can do the math. Well, I have the Discover card and the Chase Freedom card, which both have a 5% rotating quarterly category. Each of these has grocery stores, so that eliminates 2 quarters out of the year where I know I'll get 5% cash back on grocery stores. What about that other 6 months? Can I meet that grocery budget to get that 6%? What is that value? So you do the math to kind of make sure, does this make sense? And then for everything else, it's just what is the cash back? And basically your cash back options are, you have a 1% cash back on a lot of cards with a 5% bonus category. You have multi-tier cashback categories where it's like 3% grocery, 2% gas, 1% everything else, and you can like switch those up. Or you have kind of your just base, a decent level cashback for everything. And so you have like your Capital One Venture card that's 1.5% cash back on everything. Well, my Citi Double Cash card is 1% when I spend and 1% when I pay it back. So that's effectively 2%. So that's what I use for everything, unless there's some kind of bonus category within those cards, like I said with Discover or Chase, or for like Capital One Saver, it has I think it's 3% cash back on like restaurants. So anytime I go out to eat, I use that one, and that's how I kind of split it up. So you'll notice my wallet has a bunch of different credit cards in it because I'm using them specifically during certain time periods, and there's times when I never use my Chase Freedom because if it's not a bonus category I use, I'm not using it because otherwise it's 1% cash back, and I'm better off using my Citi. So that's how I kind of manage that, and again, always kind of focusing on what is that discretionary level of spending that I want to target. And I can just add up all my credit card balances and be like, oh, okay, doing good this month. Or, ooh, maybe I can't go out to dinner tonight.
There you go. Yeah. And I'm the same way. I prefer the cashback, no annual fee cards. But I think any way you spend, I think a lot of people really, really like the travel cards and cards with travel perks where you're getting points and different things like that. I think any way you spin it, I think it's really important to just understand what you get points for or what you get cash back for. Make sure that aligns with your spending. If you're only really getting good cash back rewards for gas, for example, and you use public transportation all the time, maybe it's not the best card for you.
Or work from home.
Exactly. There you go.
I never hit my my cash back bonuses on the gasoline stations anymore. My budget went to like $100 a quarter.
Yeah.
Or probably like 50 a quarter.
Yeah. And then if the perks are all for Delta travel and you only fly United or whatever it might be, maybe that's also not a great card for you. So I travel a ton personally, but I don't love the travel cards because I kind of love the flexibility of saying, okay, I want to be able to fly out at 4:55 on a Friday and choose whatever airline that is. And I'm okay flying the occasional Spirit or Frontier. That's kind of getting worse and worse. So I've had some more stories on Frontier.
Dude,
but
I know that you're okay flying those because you're on them all the time, dude. Maybe
for the short flights, I think we're going to do them less. But for me, I'd rather just get that cash back and know, okay, I can save money on a different airline or I can be more accommodative to my schedule on a different airline. I don't need the upgrade on the airline. I'd rather have that extra cash. And if I want to buy the upgrade on the airline, I can because I got that cash back. So that's kind of the way I think about it. And I think people kind of just jump into I need to get as many travel perks as I can really quickly. And I don't think that's always the answer, but every TikTok and reel will definitely tell you that's the only way to kind of go.
Yeah, I think people focus maybe a little too much on, oh, look what I'm getting for free.
Mm-hmm.
And instead should be focusing on, what did it take to accrue and earn this? It's you go to the arcade as a kid and you see the PlayStation behind the desk and you're like, oh, wow, I can get a free PlayStation if I just exchange 100,000 tickets. And it's like, right, but you do the math on how many dollars that is and the exchange rate ain't looking too good. And I think a lot of these reward programs do that too, where yeah, maybe they're giving you some kind of travel perk, but dollar for dollar, are you really getting a good bet? I mean, one of our advisors, Garrett, showed me this. I don't know if it's a website or a list that he looks at, but it basically showing the conversion rate of the different rewards dollars on different sites for different cards. And essentially some of the travel stuff is actually not that attractive on a dollar for dollar basis unless you're at specific areas. And for me, I'm content with the 2% cash back or the 5% cash back. And like I said, I see that as a discount on everything that I spend money on. And so I just get cash back as a check or a statement of credit or a deposit. And that's what it is. And I'm just getting 2% of my spending back forever, right? And that's always dollar for dollar, which is why I like it. It's very simple. And then, like you said, I can go spend that on whatever I want.
Exactly. And then I guess the last point I was going to make a little bit more, I guess, of a contrarian take in a way. It's just a different way to think of spending versus income. And it's mostly relevant for people who are in sales type of jobs where they can get commission, or if they own their own business, where the more time you put into your job and the more effort you put into your job, the more you get compensation wise. So I know that's not a ton of people. There's a lot of people who that is relevant for, but there's a lot of people who it's not. You have, if I try to work way harder in my job, I might not be getting paid anymore if I'm on a salary job, and it doesn't really have that big of an effect. But
Yeah, sure. But commission based, it
yeah,
certainly would.
yeah. And so I heard the analogy of trying to save each month, and it was like almost everyone can probably save an extra $100 a month. You can find that in your budget somewhere. You can probably stretch and save an extra $500 a month. And I'm kind of just throwing these dollar figures out. Obviously, they might be higher or lower for every household. And then if you really, really tighten up, you really try to cut out on a bunch of things. Hey, okay, maybe I can save an additional $1,000 per month, but that would be extremely, for me personally, that would be very hard to do on top of the savings I'm already doing.
Right.
And you do all of that effort and you're saving an additional $12,000 per year, which is definitely not nothing. But if you think about that in the same way of, okay, if I took all that effort, how many times I gotta grocery shop to be extremely efficient and find these deals and budget here to save that 12,000 a year. If you took that same effort and put it into the way you make income through your business or through whatever role you might have, would it be easier for you to earn an extra 12,000 in a year? And I think it's an interesting way of saying sometimes it makes sense to spend money and invest in yourself. It's not telling you to go out and buy a Lambo because, okay, with the Lamborghini, I'm going to have more opportunities to sell more insurance or whatever it might be. But I think it's an interesting way to look at expenses versus income and say, okay, maybe it makes sense to go out and have this networking dinner with someone. And I know it's a steak dinner, I'll have to pay for it, but it might lead to business, which if I do land that business or I keep doing this over a longer period of time, it's going to result in more money in my pocket versus the savings I'm saving. So I think it's a good way to kind of reframe in a lot of situations how people think about money.
Yeah, I think it's a good point of if you want more money left over at the end of the day, you can do it two ways. You can decrease your expenses or increase your income. And you've talked really about how people can increase their income maybe in the short term, working harder, putting in overtime, increasing your sales. But I think over the long term too, even people that feel like their salaries maybe don't allow them to save an extra amount, where you can go try to build new skill sets and get more education or open up different avenues and networks, right, to find a higher salary job. And that's also I think better ways. At the end of the day, it is important to be growing your income and have a sufficiently high income, and that does make it a lot easier to budget and save. And I think that's sometimes missing from some of these conversations is, okay, you've done a lot on the expense side. Let's talk about the revenue side. Let's talk about your compensation, your pay. How do we get that up? And I think that's a really important aspect of it.
Yeah, and I think it's something that like advisors don't really talk about much because it's not something I can really be like, oh, client, like how do we get your income up? But I
A
think
lot of it is seen as like a given, right? It's like an
sure. It's like you're
external
already
variable.
taking care of that, but people look at you mentioned a good point, certifications or more school or learning different skills. Everything is an investment. Are you going to get a positive return on investment if I go get an MBA or go get this certification and it costs XYZ? There's time component and then there's the money component. The amount of time and money you're putting towards those. How long is it going to take you to get your money back? Is it going to result in a positive down the line? And I think thinking about money in that vein is really, really important and something that a lot of people kind of neglect in some
Yeah.
things.
And another way to think about it is it possible for me to grow from here without that? right? Maybe it's not a slam dunk. Like if you do that, you're going to be good. But sometimes it's kind of necessary as the baseline. And I think a lot about one of my friends who worked in banking and he worked in AML, anti-money laundering controls and processes, and there was this certification that he could get to kind of make himself eligible for the next tier up. Right. And it's those things where you start to realize, okay, I'm 3 to 5 years into my job. I've developed some skills. How do I elevate from here? I like to use the term level up. How do I level up from here where it's a complete step change compared to all of my current peers and colleagues? And I think, looking for those opportunities is really important. And then when you get that raise, make sure you put half of it in savings.
Definitely. Well, it was good to kind of pick your brain on the different aspects of saving, budgeting, credit cards. I think it's something you can dive really, really deep into. I think it's also something where you're bombarded with different information from different sources. I think at the end of the day, you got to choose strategies that work for your lifestyle, to where you can still meet your goals. And I think one of the things that's great about working with an advisor or financial planning is it's not just one size fits all. It's not just, okay, this TikTok is going to apply to every single person. Everyone has different ways that they get to their goals. And I think being able to mold around that is really, really important. So that's kind of the way we think about money. I think it's very different for clients. Like if I'm talking to a specific client, it's a very rare time where I'm going to say, hey, let's use this promotional credit card and take advantage of a 0% rate for a certain amount of time. So know what works for you. It always makes sense to understand and know the options out there. And hopefully this was helpful to kind of look at what's out there.
Yeah. I hope the mappers like this topic. I think there's a lot of stuff here that everyone kind of deals with day to day. And if anything, at least you kind of hear how people like us do it, people that maybe is considered in the know, and then kind of compare that in a line. I'm sure it's very similar to what a lot of people are doing, which is great. Keep it up.
For sure. I almost want a full episode without addressing the mappers. So I'd have been glad you do that in there. They know. Well, I hope you say you don't have any punishments for your fantasy league. So,
yeah, I'll always throw some some trash talk and some insults and some stuff like that. Of course, I'm always the one in the leagues that's like right in the middle of the pack.
There you go.
I
usually suck. I somehow won last year, which I'll probably have to be saying this in 2050. That back in 2024, I won the league. So.
2024, that was the year, man.
But good chatting with you, Jeff. Appreciate you on the pod.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. Remember, the views expressed are not necessarily those of Beam Wealth Advisors. All content is for educational purposes only and should not be construed as an endorsement of any third party or their views, or as a solicitation or offer to sell securities or provide investment, tax, legal, or consulting services. We believe the information presented to be reliable, but it is not guaranteed for accuracy or completeness. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal. Hypothetical returns do not reflect actual trading and may not be indicative of the performance of any specific investment. Always consult with a qualified financial advisor before making any investment decisions. Past performance is not a guarantee of future results. Additional information, including management fees and expenses, is provided on our Form ADV Part 2, available upon request or at the SEC's Investment Advisor Public Disclosure website, advisorinfo.sec.gov.
Credit card arbitrage involves borrowing funds at a low interest rate, typically through promotional credit card offers, and investing those funds in higher-yielding assets. This strategy carries significant risks, including the potential for interest rate increases, loss of promotional terms, investment losses, and damage to credit scores. Investors should carefully consider their financial situation, risk tolerance, and ability to repay borrowed funds before engaging in credit card arbitrage. This strategy may not be suitable for all investors, and past performance is not indicative of future results. The use of credit cards as a part of an investment or financial strategy may introduce significant risks. These include high interest rates, potential damage to credit scores, loss of promotional terms, and the possibility of accumulating debt that exceeds repayment capacity. Credit card financing is not suitable for all investors and should be approached with caution. Investors should carefully evaluate their financial situation, risk tolerance, and ability to repay before using credit cards for investment purposes. This communication is intended for informational purposes only and does not constitute a recommendation or guarantee of future performance.